Our lesson today is about completing the square. In order to be able to complete the square, you want to begin with the form x squared plus bx. How you complete the square is you take your b and you divide it by 2. And then you square it, thus completing the square. And then from here, after you find this, when we get into an equals, then you put it not only on one side, but you also put it on the other side of an equal. And we're fixing to do a problem so you can see it a little better. We're going to say x squared plus, minus 10x plus c. And they want us to find c and write the equation as a binomial. So what we need to do, again, we're starting with x squared plus bx. So we have x squared and a bx, and because this is what we're looking for is our c. And so it tells us that we need to do b divided by 2. So we have a negative 10 divided by 2 gives us a negative 5. And then we're going to square it because that's what our rule says. So I can say x squared minus 10x plus a negative 5 squared. So a negative 5 squared is 25. A negative 5 times the negative 5. So I can rewrite as x squared minus 10x plus 25. But now we have to look, and they want us to write it as a binomial. All right, so what we want to do is take into account that we found that our b divided by 2 is a negative 5. And so we can go ahead and rewrite as x minus 5 times x minus 5, which can be rewritten since they're the exact same. You're going to say x minus 5 squared. And so now we have written the equation as a binomial. The first concept we're going to look at is solving ax squared plus bx plus c equaling 0 when a equals 1. And so we have a problem, 1x squared minus 16x plus 8 equals 0. The first thing we want to do is get our equation into x squared plus bx form. In order to do that, we have to move our positive 8 to the other side of the equal sign, which means we change the operation. And so I'm going to go ahead and rewrite as x squared minus 16x equals a negative 8. Now I have it in x squared plus bx form. The next step we do is to take the b, divide it by 2. So a negative 16 divided by 2 gives us a negative 8. So we have x squared minus 16x, and then we're going to say plus a negative 8. And remember, we have to square it. That's how we complete the square. And so I have it written, and I still do my negative 8. And then I want to go ahead and add it to this side also, a negative 8 squared. This is by doing the b over 2 squared. Now, when you see it in this form, you can rewrite as x minus 8 times x minus 8 equals a negative 8, and then a negative 8 squared is a positive 64. Because there are 2 of these, we can go ahead and write it as 1 squared. And a negative 8 plus 64 gives us 56. The next thing we have to do is get our squared to the other side. So the opposite of squared is square root. And so I'm going to go ahead and square root x minus 8 squared equals, again, because it says squared, it's a positive or negative square root of 56. What that leaves is x minus 8 equals a plus or minus square root 56. But we want to solve for x, and so we need to move our negative 8 to the opposite side of the equal sign, which means we are going to change the operation. So x equals a positive 8 plus or minus the square root of 56. The last thing you need to look at when you're solving is to see if you have any perfect square root within 56. And I can see that I do, and so I can rewrite this as 8 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 14. By looking at it in this format, I can see that the square root of 4 is 2. So I can say 8 plus or minus 2 square root 14. So if I want to write my answers separately, my answers are going to be 8 plus 2 square root 14 and 8 minus 2 square root 14. And that is how we solve x squared minus 16x plus 8 equals 0. The next concept we want to look at is, again, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, but this time when our a doesn't equal 1. So I chose 3x squared plus 6x plus 15 equals 0. The first thing you want to try to do is divide out anything that all three numbers have in common. And that happens to be 3. So I'm going to go ahead and divide that out. What that leaves is x squared plus 2x plus 5 equals 0. Now we see it's in this form, but this time our a does equal 1. So we go back to what we just worked, the problem we just worked where it does equal 1, and we can put it into the x squared plus bx form. So I want x squared plus bx form. So that means I have to move my 5 to the other side of the equal sign, which means I change the operation. So I have x squared plus 2x equals a negative 5 because there's the opposite operation. The next step is to divide my b in half. So I want to divide by 2. And then I want to square that. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite x squared plus 2x. And then plus, we did 2 divided by 2, which is 1 squared, which equals a negative 5. And whatever I did to this side, this plus 1 squared, I have to do to the other side. So plus 1 squared. I'm going to go ahead, because I see this is a squared and this is a squared, I can rewrite that as x plus 1 times x plus 1. And on this side, we have a negative 5 plus 1 squared, which is just 1. So I can say a negative 4. Because these two are the exact same, I can go ahead and rewrite as x plus 1 squared equals a negative 4. But now we need to get rid of our squared. So we have to square root. So square root x plus 1 squared equals, because it's squared, we say plus or minus the square root of a negative 4. I can see right now that I have a complex. Well, I have a negative inside my radical. You cannot have a negative inside the radical. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite that, and I have my x plus 1 equals a plus or minus. The way to get rid of the negative is my I. My I square root 4. So I now want to solve for a, which means I have to get my x by itself. And so I'm going to say x equals, it's a positive 1 right now. When I move it to the other side, it becomes a negative 1 plus or minus I square root 4. But I have one more thing to do. I can do the square root of 4 because I know that 2 times 2 is 4. So I can rewrite it as a negative 1 plus or minus 2i. And so if you separate your answers into 2 answers, you have a negative 1 plus 2i and a negative 1 minus 2i. So that is how you solve ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 when a does not equal 1. The last concept for today in completing the square is to write a quadratic function in vertex form. The first thing I want to do is to remember what vertex form looks like. So I'm going to write it down. I want my answer to be in the form of y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. That's the form I want. And so I've got to look at what they gave me, and I'm going to use completing the square. How I'm going to do that is to say, okay, well, instead of moving my constant right now over, I'm going to go ahead and leave it to the side, and instead I'm going to say parentheses x squared plus 12x. Remember my b, I need to take half of it, which is 6, and I square it. So that gives me plus 36, and then I have plus 6 because I still have my outside. And what I did over here is I added 36, so I have to add 36 over here. All right, so the next thing I want to do is, what did I find this to be? I found it to be 6 squared. And so I can rewrite it as x plus 6 squared plus 6, and I still have my 36 over here. And you can see it's starting to get to be the right form. I now have my a, which is my understood 1. I have my x, I have my h, I have a squared, and I have a k. But what I need to do is get rid of this 36 on the side with my y. So I solve for y, which means I'm going to do the opposite operation. Right now, it's showing a positive 36. So when I move it to the other side of the equal sign, I have to subtract 36. So x plus 6 squared plus 6 minus 36, which is going to give us x plus 6 squared minus 30. Now I can see I have my y, I have my understood a, I have my x, I have my h, and I have my k. So what would the vertex be? The vertex is our h and our k. So it would be a negative 6 because a minus a negative gets us our positive, and we need a negative from the original form. And then my minus 30, it should be a positive. So I'm going to say negative 30 is my y. And there's my vertex in x squared plus 12x plus 6.